So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to those who are here, and good afternoon to those as well who are watching this session online. Yesterday we took up certain ideas, the new Weberial state model, and we dealt substantively with the NPM. Right. I believe probably every sort of perspective which is needed at this level has been covered. So before I start for today's session, let me know if there are any queries. You must have revised, you must have seen your own previous notes, etc. Regarding NPM. And I've tried to deal with NPM in this manner for the simple reason. And we saw in our PYQ analysis that how a lot many questions from NPM are being asked increasingly, far more than what is being asked, let us say, from NPA. Okay. So any queries whatsoever? Okay. All right. So today we'll keep certain scheme of things. We'll be looking at critical theory. Though I touched upon it in the very end, but I will give a more structured idea of critical theory. Also, we'll be looking at anti-ideology, anti-Eurocentricism. Though the words are explanatory, but we should have some basic 4 or 5 points regarding that. Mind you, a direct question on them is very unlikely. But you can incorporate these perspectives in your analysis, and that actually enriches. Then the normative question. So in your session plan, which is like this, okay, you have a lot of these things already mentioned. And then we'll be moving to, I will be skipping the evolution because that has been already discussed. Then we'll be moving to the administrative thought, right? And in a composite manner, we'll be dealing with administrative thought, and that is how we will move on. I told you that we are going to cover ARCs as well, so they will also come in due course. But the session plan that you have is of 23 sessions. In 23 sessions, we'll cover whatever is given plus the ARC and the small tidbits that I keep giving in every session. Good afternoon, Ane. Good afternoon, Saurabh. Okay, so this is going to be the architecture with which we will move. Right, so let's have a look at the critical theory. Before I move substantively into the critical theory, can anybody tell me what do we mean by critical theory? It is anti-bureaucracy. Okay, what else? You see, to understand critical theory, we will have to understand that the name suggests critical theory. That means it is critical. Okay, as a secular field of inquiry, critical theory would mean a critique of, when I say public administration, that means whatever is the established, well recognized, framework of public administration, it is looking at it with a critical lens. Now, please understand, public administration both as a discipline and as well as an activity. If I use the critical terminology, it's an uncertain area. Its boundaries are uncertain, ever changing, ever evolving. Though, people who like public administration, like all of us would, we would not call it like that. Right. But there is a lack of indigenous content vis-a-vis public administration. Whatever content has been there, it has largely been inspired from a lot of other fields: sociology, political science, economics, etc., management, psychology, whatnot. And hence these conceptual frameworks are borrowed from multiple areas. And the critical theory in this sense offers a critique on the functioning of public administration and how it can be improved. So please understand, it is critiquing the way it is. It is not saying that the public administration is a bad idea, completely demolish the subject. Okay, it is not saying that. Also, when we see the life cycle of public administration, let us say for simplistic purposes, from Wilson till today, okay, we see that this critique, it's not something that has come today. It has always been appearing, reappearing, depending upon whatever was prevailing. Okay? So that is something which is important. If you see, the idea actually emerged in the 18th century in Europe and America, basically to use science, reason, and individual self-determination so that you can keep the religious mysticism things at bay. Critical theory is something that originates in the Frankfurt School. In 1920s. It's not a school. Basically, it's not a school like ABC, St. Xavier's or Bal Vidya Mandir or like that. No. The idea is that there was a Frankfurt School of scholars. Okay. And they were actually looking at the critical theory. The term was coined by another Max Horkheimer. Max Horkheimer, Horkheimer. A German. Frankfurt is in Germany. Who was basically studying the then traditional theories and actually provided a critique. Okay? To basically look at the emancipation from the slavery. So critical theory, first we have to understand that it is not a homogeneous single body of theory. There are multiple perspectives. So somebody is critiquing it from the economic lens, so there is an economic perspective. Social lens, social perspective. Psychological lens, psychological perspective, etc. Okay? So it's a wide range of theory. Theories like neo-Marxism, which we discussed, Gramsci, others. Okay? Feminism, postmodernism, post-colonialism. Okay? And different theories take different, inspiration. But in spite of that, there are certain common strands that emerge. Those common strands are the post-positivist methodology. So all of them largely are looking at it from the post-positivist lens. I hope you remember positivism, post-positivism, right? First session we talked about it. Okay? There is a central theme, that is change and emancipation. That they want to do things for the better. Okay? For whom? For subjugated people, classes, castes. Okay? Because they think that the positivist approach to gain knowledge about a particular issue is flawed. Okay? And necessarily positivism would lead to objectivity. That is also being questioned. They say that the knowledge cannot be independent of its social context. Okay? And hence the criticism for the positivist idea. For example, they say that the classical differentiation from the positivist lens that we look in public administration, for example, fact value, is or ought to be. Okay, objectivity and subjectivity. They say that this classification is not very rational. Because in reality, things don't operate in this way. Okay? So, the critical theory actually interrogate the sources. That what is the root cause of this, let us say, violence? What is the root cause of disempowerment? What is the root cause of subjugation? And based on that, they devise certain strategies. I hope you all have read Gramsci when I told you yesterday. So Gramsci is also doing one of these things only when he is critiquing the Marxist. Okay. So what is the approach that they are using? Post-positivist. I mean, this is the substantiation of what I meant. Okay. With regards to the public administration and the Marxist school, there are two strands of critical theory basically that emerge. The first one by the Frankfurt School. In this, Habermas heard about the gentleman? कहाँ पढ़ा? Right. Right. So Habermas actually gives a critique, and so another very prominent school, thought was Gramsci. Okay. So we will have to understand that this Frankfurt School that we are talking was established in 1923. Okay. Then Nazi party came in Germany and the school moved to Paris. When Germany invaded France, Second World War, then the school moved to New York. So wherever this school was moving, right, it was actually incorporating the views of the places that it was moving. Okay. So Horkheimer, in his essay, Traditional and Critical Theory, which got published in 1937, Horkheimer is regarded, or his work is regarded as the agenda setter for the critical theory of this school, Frankfurt School. And he argued that the traditional theories are nothing but content to describe the present or the existing social institutions as they are. And hence what it is doing, it is actually reinforcing and legitimizing the present way of working, which is not the most optimum way or not the most correct way, and is devoid of the larger social context. Habermas was amongst the most influential, scholars of this school. And Critical theory, especially in IR and other places, it is a huge contribution of Habermas. He also criticized the positivist method. He says that the knowledge gained by positivism, write this down very, very clearly. The knowledge gained by positivism is actually a means for or a tool for social control. Social control. Whereas the real purpose of knowledge should be human emancipation. He criticizes Marx. Marx means Karl Marx. He criticizes Marx for ignoring the importance of communication in developing the class consciousness amongst the proletariat. And based on this, he comes up with his theory of communication. Okay, where do we read communication? Chester Bernard, very good. So while analyzing Chester Bernard, if you can link it with that in some aspects. Okay? Now, what does critical theory should do? The core functions of critical theory. It should be based on concepts like freedom and universality, to build an alternative world order. To build an alternative world order. The theory should identify the obstacles. Second point is, the theory should identify the obstacles which are there in building such world order. The third is, it should work on emancipatory practice. How to get out of that? They say that the positive method, the positivist method, realism or Marxism alone cannot serve. And hence it argues to go beyond Marxism. That is why we see neo-Marxism or post-Marxism. That is where we are putting all this, no? Gramsci, critical theory, etc. According to their worldview, state is an exclusionary and inclusionary form of political community. State is both exclusionary and inclusionary. Can anybody tell me how it is inclusionary?
So it takes the idea of the masses.
भाई सीधी सी बात, इतना सोचने की जरूरत ही नहीं है इसमें. कभी कभी थिंग्स आर वेरी सिंपल, हम ज्यादा सोचने लगते हैं. वी स्टार्ट थिंकिंग अ लॉट. Simple. It gives citizens, it treats citizens in an equitable manner, it gives them rights. Okay? But at the same time, it is exclusionary because it treats foreigners or people from the outside differently. So state has a limited political power. And the citizens, as we all are, we are not just the citizens of the country, we are world citizens. So please understand, this critical theory is actually looking at a parallel world. Okay, so from that perspective, we have to see those things. Okay, so the critical theory is looking at this new world order and the transformation of this political community to a new form of cosmopolitanism at the world level. Now, if you incorporate, here is a cue for you. In paper 2, related to law and order, in paper 2 related to law and order and other aspects where we are talking about divisions, let us say regionalism, right? Law and order issues based on some dividing line, caste, this and that. You can use this cosmopolitan idea being given by the critical theory. Okay? So that is something that you should keep in mind. Now, let us look at the academic inquiry that critical theory actually deals in. So, it is a post-Marxian, neo-Marxian idea. So, it deals with certain things. For example, contradiction. It dealt with the contradiction, fact, value, objective, subjective. Just now, the inclusive and the exclusionist and the inclusivist. Okay? Dialectic. And change. You see, a primary belief of critical theory is that the social systems actually change over time because of built-in tensions, contradictions between how they are and how they could be. And these contradictions, these challenges, these complexities that arise, they cannot be solved the way they are. You will have to go for change. You will have to move beyond. Okay? So the dialectism as it is, it's a Hegelian concept. Hegel? अरे Hegel पता है? Hegel का नाम सुना है? Friends watching us online, has anybody heard of Hegel? किसी ने नहीं सुना? Sad. You see, the Hegelian method of inquiry actually does not have a predetermined outcome. Okay, and based on that, they are rejecting the objectivistic Marxism. Because Marx actually has a predetermined goal, outcome in mind. And based on that, he is inquiring. That means they are looking for the deeper reality. Okay? In public administration, if you can see the postmodernist theories, like I said, they all have a critical character to them. Because what we are doing as part of the postmodern theory, we are looking at not just what is there today, but looking into the future. I made you write that thing, right? In the postmodernism when we were discussing it. So you see, critical theory, write this line, critical theory provides an ethical impulse. Critical theory provides an ethical impulse towards substantive equality and democracy. In this regard, you see, Habermas critiques the traditional bureaucracy. He says that with the expansion of public administration, the public bureaucracy has expanded. But the acceptance, the popular acceptance of that bureaucracy has not expanded in the commensurate manner. And therefore, you see, bureaucracy is getting criticized as a self-aggrandizing entity, which is seemingly alienated from the public, and hence the loss of faith. Also, he looks at those contradictions, that the bureaucratic interest and the public interest are at loggerheads, and therefore advises against over bureaucratization. And that is why you see critical theory is emphasizing on debureaucratization, democratization, free flow of communication, etc. Okay, that is why you see a traditional hierarchical organization, especially in dynamic environments, they fail to actually respond, because the bureaucratic inertia takes away the entire energies. Flatter organizations, agile organizations, they are able to respond. That is where the innovation is coming from. Okay, because the traditional hierarchical organizations are busy in the routine functions so much. Their energies get exhausted in the routine functions. Okay? You see, the critical approach actually, like I said, it involves a systematic. It is not to say that the critical approach is random. It also advocates, and I gave you the processes, the functions, a systematic inquiry into a systematic analysis of the social conditions. So, for the status quoist scholars, that okay, administration is like this, it will be run like this, critical theory offers a counter narrative. Okay, just write down briefly the what do we mean by dialectic, the term. I'm giving you the term dialectic so that you can, when you will revise later, you need not Google. Dialectism or dialectic would mean a philosophical system, a philosophical system of asserting truth, of asserting truth by resolving the references, by resolving the references that exists between factors, that exists between factors in a particular situation. In a particular situation. ठीक है जी? Understood? Any doubts whatsoever? Any doubts? And that ends our discussion on critical theory. Flip through the pages and let me know if you have any doubts, and then we move ahead with anti-ideology.
What Habermas criticizes Marx for?
Habermas is actually criticizing Marx that he undermined the importance of communication in invoking the class consciousness.
From one-sided, he gave one-sided theory.
No, not the idea of one-sided. Habermas actually saying he's not actually because the lack of the proper communication is enabling the elite class to actually control. So to awaken the class consciousness of proletariat, Habermas criticizes Marx for not giving the due importance to communication. Okay. Now let's move to anti-ideology. You see, in the simplistic terms, the rejection of the rigid ideological framework in favor of pragmatic and flexible approaches is anti-ideology. So, it emphasizes more on practical than theoretical. It seeks to provide solutions to the administrative problems based on their immediate and relevant administrative contexts rather than through the ideological dogmas. Okay. So what will be the highlight? The highlight would be pragmatism over ideology. Also, the context specific solutions. Okay. Whereas what the theory building says that you should follow the theory. Okay. So when we say context specific solutions, that means not a one size fits all approach. Tailored approaches. Now you can link it with anti-development thesis. Anti-development thesis. समझ में आ रहा है ना? Okay. It is talking about flexibility and adaptability. Flexibility and adaptability. It is giving a critique to grand theories. Now, when we say it critiques grand theories, that means it favors incrementalism, empirical evidence based it is nothing but a further reflection of anti-politics. Anti-politics would mean that skepticism with the traditional political structures and ideology. Okay, so that is anti-ideology. So whole critical theory is what? In a way, whole critical theory, a strand of critical theory which is dismissive of the traditional ideological Weberian kind of view is like this. Similarly, with concepts like I said, anti-development thesis, neo-localism, this will relate. Okay. Next, anti-Eurocentric approach. Well, when we say Europe, we do not mean in this case the Balkans or things like that. That means largely the Western dominance and particularly the European perspectives of public administration. And the idea of anti-Eurocentric approach is basically Eurocentrism as an ideology was what? It is a colonial, baggage which assumed that Europe is at the center of the world. Everything actually moves, and colonialism actually reinforced that notion. But the modern times, especially with the rise of United States, rise of Japan, for example, in the 19th century and we see that through the 20th century as well, right? I mean, Japan was one of the major powers to actually challenge the West, and it almost gave the run for money to Britishers and Americans in the India, China, Burma theater and the Pacific. Okay, so the idea of anti-Eurocentric is simple, that Europe is not the center. You need to involve more non-Western perspective, and it emphasizes upon the local knowledge and experiences. Therefore, it is actually a voice for the decolonization of public administration. कहाँ यूज होगा ये? जल्दी बताओ. Come on. Where will we use this? इतना पढ़ाया है फिर भी. Thatcherism, Reaganism, again a Western idea. अरे भाई, new CPA? Yes, to an extent in NPM and NPA, where I was talking about the throughput effect to deal with the prismatic elements. Okay, it is looking at inclusivity and diversity. Now this will make what? This will make administrative practices, administration more culture or context sensitive. Local knowledge and practices. Emphasis on local knowledge and practices. You see that we have a traditional structure, and this is a very important point. We have a traditional structure of government. There's a central government, state governments, and this. Then you have tribal autonomous regions, tribal councils. It is supportive of what? This approach. Again, you can plug it with neo-localism, anti-development thesis and all that. It offered a critique to the Western dominance. It presents a global South perspective of public administration. I mean, through this approach. Okay, understood? So this was the anti-Eurocentric idea. It is better to have these specifics so that you can use these terminology. That's it. I mean, otherwise it was very clear by the name itself.
Yes, I think this.
Thinkers are not required for this. Okay, even if you want to adopt the thinkers, the postmodernist would plug and play here.
It's paper 2.
It is to be used in paper 2 and paper 1 both. That is why I was linking neolocalism. You study where? Paper 2. Okay. So you can use the postmodernist thinker, the contemporary theories and all that. They are also telling what? Basically at essence we are telling what? That public administration should be ecological. It should be not viewed from
Western or certain thing.
right. You can use them here. Understood this part, friends? Friends watching us online. So Anay is saying, sir, we can say that development administration is anti-Eurocentric. Yes, we must say that the development administration as it should be practiced should be from an anti-Eurocentric point of view, to be more contextual, to be more relevant. This we can say. But can we say that the concept of development administration is anti-Eurocentric? No. We cannot say that. Because that is again a very important part of the larger theoretical edifice of the public administration. Understood that? Okay, great. Next, let us move to the normative question. You see, the positivist character of public administration. And we cannot say that this positivist character is dead. Because we have never said that the empiricism should be completely done away. What we have done is, or what post-positivists do, it critiques the way positive character was being approached, how it ignored the social and the other contexts. So the normative question in public administration actually is about moving beyond the empiricism. Okay, it is not against it, but it is moving beyond. So it concerns with the values and ethical principles. That should guide the administrative actions and decisions. It actually tells what public administration ought to do. Ethics तो पढ़ा है ना सबने, मेंस लिख रहे हैं. Based upon the moral and ethical dimensions of government in action. So, it looks at the ethical foundations of the, or it emphasizes upon the ethical foundations of the public administration. Then it will do what? It will emphasize on what? integrity, fairness, justice. While making decisions, it says that the value-based decisions, value-laden or value-based. Come on, where will you link it? अरे साइमन, अरे अपने साइमन चाचा, he talked about fact value dichotomy. So while critiquing Simon, you can use the normative approach. क्या समझे? ठीक है? So that the wider implications on the society of such decisions can be evaluated. Please understand, it is not an absolutist idea. When we say the normative question or the normative approach, it is about a balance between ethics and efficiency. That you look for efficiency but not compromise on the ethical dimensions. This thing will help you in GS paper 4 as well. Okay? Also, it stresses upon public interest and accountability. Public interest and accountability. In dealing with what? In dealing with contemporary challenges such as corruption, technological challenges, lack of transparency, etc., etc. ठीक है जी. So this is regarding the normative question. Understood that? Any doubts? एक बारी देख लो. Flip through the normative question, anti-Eurocentrism, anti-ideology approach. Okay.
So if we compare the normative and empirical approach, which one helps more in theory building?
Which one helps more in theory building? That depends which approach you are using, with which lens you are, which subject you are dealing with. For example, if I'm dealing with economics, either obsession with either approach will be flawed. Okay, we will have to use a mix, right? Empiricism is a good way of theory building. Normative theory building is far more challenging because it has to account for the subjective factors as well. Whereas in empiricism, you are only looking at the objective factors and making those decisions. Both are useful. It is not again an either or question.
So in graph of public administration as a theory building, it starts from Wilson. इसका peak कहाँ पे होगा? Simon पे या फिर?
कहीं peak नहीं होगा, because you see peak would happen if you look at the way you put the question. If you are saying this is a graph, right? Where will its peak be? The idea is that the area being, mathematically speaking, the area being covered by this graph is not constant. The scope of public administration has been changing, ever changing, and only this is the accepted, all accepted reality. So where will you can say that it is the peak? When it was the classical era thought, okay, this is the peak. हो क्या रहा है? The state and the society, they are in constant motion. Whenever they reach a balance, that is fine. The moment this balance gets disturbed, the public administration comes under the question. And the moment it comes under the question, it has to expand its horizons and see that, okay, what more can be done? What more, to be done to solve a complex issue? And that expands and diversifies the scope. Essentially, when we say that the evolution of public administration has been ecological, and we draw the number line, those 5 paradigms, age of crisis, this, every time the ecology is shaping, no? So can you say that it has reached the peak? For every section, it might have a peak. When the classical theory was there, NPA came, NPA said, no. Each alvena, this won't work. Then NPM came, then NPM, it had its flaws, PCT, NPS, these things came, governance, good governance came. Now, with the good governance era, the way we are, can we say that the NPM is dead? No. In some hues, you will find the NPM. Yes, a bit in a modified structure. Governance, good governance, if you look at it itself, is a very open-ended paradigm. It is not a close-ended paradigm like the SMT or CMT. Okay, so there will never be any peak. So if you are going to, let us say, just, for indulging in your question, that today I need to build a theory of public administration, I will be back to square one. Either it will be so wide that it will have everything, or so narrow that it will have nothing. Understood the idea? So you need both empiricism and normativism, because empiricism will make your theory or keep the theory as a method of inquiry but not as a method of implementation. Normativism will look at just the implementation, not the theory, the universality. But public administration is what? Public administration is both a discipline as well as a practice or activity or profession. But remember, when we talked about the blurring of lines between activity and profession yesterday, in previous class we talked about, it is getting more closer. Why? Because of the intermingling, because of this very normative approach and the contextualness character of the public administration. ठीक है, समझ में आ गया अभिजीत? ओके, अब हो गया ना मॉडिफाई? पबैट के हिसाब से ऐसे ही लर्निंग वी विल हैव टू सॉर्ट ऑफ बिल्ड. वरना एडवांस का मतलब क्या है? वरना कुछ एडवांस का मतलब नहीं. हाँ, वो घोटते रहो, अपने आप करता रहेगा. ठीक है, आगे आ जाओ. ठीक है, should we continue? Okay. So these were the perspectives that I wanted to give. Now I want to touch upon an idea which is from the administrative thought, but also not from the administrative thought. It is something which is related to the wider debate of regarding public administration. So I want to actually convey the post-Weberian idea. And that is why I am not taking up administrative thought to begin with. Otherwise, we will start with CMT, SMT, this and that. But Weberian idea and the post-Weberian idea has come into question. Even if not, you can use it for your analysis. Okay, because if I say that, okay, what is legal rational authority? What is charismatic authority? Right, you all know that. So For this, we will first look at the bureaucratic approach itself. And through that, basically post-Weberian, all of you know, right? NPM is what? It is post-Weberian, right? But how do we arrive at that? So for that, the bureaucratic idea is something that is to be known. You see, when we talk about the bureaucratic idea and the notion of bureaucracy, it is not a new entity. It has existed since the empire ages. Because the moment the communities became somewhat bigger, the functions of the communities got diversified. That is how, nation states and other things emerge. The bureaucracy has always been there. Every day you touch upon the facets of bureaucracy, either directly or indirectly in some way of life. You are coming here by a metro, there is bureaucratic, involvement somewhere. So if we look at the contemporary age, this bureaucracy has become indispensable. It is an indispensable institution for the public policy, for the state. Whether you look at the Mauryan Empire, Chinese, Roman, Ottomans, Mughals, Japan, China, all of them had the system of bureaucracy. Now, what is a characteristic? What is a central characteristic? Bureaucracy, if in simple mathematical terms I have to understand, this very bureaucracy is characterized by hierarchy. Is hierarchy democratic? No, by their structure. If somebody is superior, other is subordinate. Can it be democratic? Because democracy would mean equality. No. So by definition, if we see, bureaucracies are never democratic in structure, nor the purpose. Initially, in the time of monarchies, they were created to administer. They were created to discharge authority, expand the domains, and protect from threats. While the modern democratic states, they also perform similar functions, just the manner has been changed. The function of the traditional bureaucracy was based on what? Personal loyalty. Personal loyalty. Some cousin is this minister. He's that secretary, he's that. It was like that. Whereas the modern bureaucracy is designed or premised upon impersonality. Impersonality would mean that it is away from the political or social power. Merit based, rational, okay. But please understand, while this is there, the facts that we have highlighted right now, but this very bureaucracy is at the interface of state and society. And hence, if we see the politics and the society, it is this very bureaucracy which is at the interface. So, and it is based on a hierarchy. If you see a society, even society has hierarchy. So bureaucracy itself is a social system. है कि नहीं? ये एंगल समझ में आ रहा है? That bureaucracy is also a social system. Cut to behaviorals. Behaviorals say what? That an organization is a social system. Okay. So it is a social entity that is in constant interaction with the politics and society. Often we equate this very bureaucracy with public administration, organization or management. Okay? But the true picture of the bureaucracy is not just administration, management or organization. We will have to see this bureaucracy in relation to the state, society, economy. So the initial studies that were made on bureaucracy was looking at it from a narrow lens as organizations within a government system. What is internal, what is external? External dimensions were positivistic in nature. They were looking at the inter-institutional relationships. This is one bureaucracy, this is another bureaucracy, how one secretary is related to other secretary, how information is being passed from one department to other department. Whereas the intra-dimension or the internal dimension was related to what is happening within these institutions. That is how, in a simplistic manner, we were looking at the bureaucracy. But the modern times actually demanded that we have a look on the bureaucracy with a new lens. And therefore, more attempt was made to look at bureaucracy in relation to the politics, society, etc. So, for example, Marx is actually viewing that bureaucracy in the societal setup. Okay, J.S. Mill, Hegel, okay, understood? Now please understand, I am not talking here about just the Weberian bureaucracy. We are discussing the idea of bureaucracy as a whole. Yes, Weber had the most impactful contribution vis-a-vis we see bureaucracy today. Okay, so if we look at the bureaucracy itself, whether we are looking at Taylor, Wilson, Goodnow, Gulick, etc. all of them have contributed to the understanding of the bureaucracy. You see, it was a Western ethnocentric view to begin with. So the focus was the placement of this bureaucracy in a capitalistic society. So the initial focus, and this is an analysis which I am giving you of bureaucracy, which may be slightly different from what you have read in the foundation. And this is important to understand the perspective, because we are looking at so many things. We are looking at ethnocentrism, the Western bias, and all of them. So initially, the study of the bureaucracy was ethnocentric, Western ethnocentric view of bureaucracy. That how they will operate in a capitalistic society. But something happens. And that thing is Second World War. The empires, the colonialized world, sun never sets in British Empire, all those notions were gone. And therefore, the ethnocentric view of the bureaucracy was beginning to get questioned. And now, also, you see, largely these societies were capitalistic, or monarchic in nature. The pre-Second World War. Okay, few democracies were there. Yes, France was a democracy, American was a democracy, but with heavy capitalistic undertones. Okay, so now the Second World War changes the background in which this bureaucracy was operating. Okay, now you were looking at this bureaucracy to actually work in the democratic setting. Okay, and basically this is the idea of our study, that how and why this progression happens and how and why it moves. So with regards to bureaucracy, there is an instrumentalist view. Instrumentalist view would mean that bureaucracy is nothing but a tool, instrument, or a mechanism, so that the goals can be realized. हाँ, कुछ कह रहे हो? Okay. So that the goals can be realized. This associates bureaucracy with rationality. And with public administration, we see it as a tool for public service delivery. Okay? So you need to get Aadhaar card made, go to bureaucracy. You need to implement a PDS, go to bureaucracy. Okay, you need ration, go to bureaucracy. Okay? So basically a cadre of qualified individuals who have been appointed to certain positions as prescribed by rule of law. ये बात समझ में आई? You see, हम धीरे धीरे धागे खोल रहे हैं इसमें. We are slowly and slowly drawing the threads. Understand? एक बारी समझ में आ गया. Once you understand this, you are never going to forget it. So the first view of bureaucracy is an instrumentalist view, which is viewing it like this: ration card banana, PDS, right, Aadhaar card, and all that. Okay. Next is a far more philosophical view, which is about looking at this bureaucracy as an agent of power. To exert control over the members or the citizens. For what? For some vested interest, or to protect the interest of the bureaucratic system itself. So therefore, second view, which is a critical view of bureaucracy, is actually the beginning of the idea of decoding the idea of bureaucratization. So it says that the bureaucracy is moving beyond its remit, that it is going into areas where it was not initially thought to be going. You see, these two strands that we draw for bureaucracy are not opposing to each other. Please understand this. It is just the different views, or rather looking at the possibilities of the bureaucracy. But please remember, initially what we thought. Please pay attention. So while we are looking at this true strand, the instrumentalist and the philosophical view, where it is serving as an agent of power and control, it is not operating in isolation. Please understand. So the question here is not which view should be emphasized. Rather, what is the focus and locus of that view? What is the environment, the circumstances in which either the bureaucratization is needed or the debureaucratization is needed? It is not that bureaucratization is bad or debureaucratization is good. It will always be contextual. So whenever you say that the Weberian bureaucracy is relevant or not, it is contextual. Okay? Also, theoretically speaking, if we analyze bureaucracy vis-a-vis organization, two conflicting views emerge. One is the positive view. Remember, not positivistic, positive view. That means enablers. And other is the negative view, which is called as coercive. Okay? ये aspects पढ़े पहले?
Yes, sir.
कहाँ?
Bureaucracy in organization, suppose the work's done, it can be done through bureaucracy you like, or and sometimes coercive, negative use means structured way, the lead public
थोड़ा सा clarity चाहिए. Okay, देते हैं वो clarity. So whenever you look at the positive view or the enabler view, it provides the guidance and clarifies the job responsibility. So it increases the effectiveness in the organizational setting. Remember, bureaucracy vis-a-vis an organization we are looking at it. Okay? On the other hand, it quashes the negative view. It quashes or subdues the creativity. Why? Because it is rigid, which leads to dissatisfaction or demotivation. Whereas the first one will lead to motivation. So link it where? Give me 2-3 places where you can link it. Paper 1, paper 2.
post bureaucratic.
अरे वो तो ठीक है, पेपर 1 पोस्ट ब्यूरोक्रेटिक तो ठीक है. थ्योरी ऑफ मोटिवेशंस, how the leader or the manager should behave. In a bureaucratic hierarchical organization, manager should have a positive view to get results. Simple correlation. Next, cut to personnel administration. Paper 1. There also career advancement, job specification, all those things. ठीक? Another point, paper 2. Civil service and civil service reforms. Whenever you talk about vagueness, whenever you talk about discretion, whenever you talk about the job specificity, job description, job requirement, आएगा कि नहीं आएगा ये? तो फिर सिलेबस भूल गए क्या? मेंस लिखना है इस बार. कहां हो? कहां चल रहा है दिमाग? यहीं हो कहीं और हो? लिंक कर पा रहे हो इसे? So enabler will do what? Enabler will keep in mind the well-being of the employee as central to achieve the organizational goals. Whereas the coercive will use the force and punishment. चलो बताओ क्लासिकल थिंकर कहां लिंक होगा ये? थ्योरी एक्स थ्योरी वाई. वेरी गुड. मैग्रेगर, डगलस मैग्रेगर, right? Also the system of incentive and rewards, Taylor. So if I ask you a 10 marker, the Taylorian edifice of the organization was essentially Weberian. Comment. This is the question. Chalo, likh ke lana hai. Today's homework 1. The Taylorian edifice of the organization was essentially Weberian. Comment. अब similarities और differences लाने. अरे दिमाग लगाओ यारों. Are you getting this point or not? ये समझ में आ रहा है मैं कहां लेके जा रहा हूं? Friends watching online, are you getting this? Yes, even Maslow, right? Somebody from online who are watching, even Maslow you can incorporate. Needs hierarchy. So any bureaucratic organization that will have more of the coercive idea will find it difficult to realize its goals. So this brings us to a question. This brings us to a question. How we can move from the positive to the, or how we can move from negative to the positive. Okay, understood? Now let us place Weber, because to understand this shift we will have to understand Weber. That's fine, you all know Weber, but what was pre-Weber and what is post-Weber? But how Weber came should be understood, what was before it and what is beyond Weber. Okay? Yes, and clear. You see, often we think that Weber was the first one to actually work on bureaucracy as a matter of study. But that is not true. Weber was not the first one. There were many scholars. For example, Hegel, Mills, J.S. Mill, Karl Marx, who actually were looking at from different perspectives. For example, Marx was looking at it from the sociological perspective, the elite class, the proletariat and all that, right? But they were analyzing how the state is functioning and through what instrument it is functioning. Okay, so a stage was set And these perspectives, are something that are important to understand Weber. So, first, let us understand the perspective of J.S. Mill, not S. S is not there. J.S. Mill. So, when we'll be dealing with administrative thought, I will not be touching upon Weber that much. Okay, we'll breeze through it. Because we are dealing with Weber, the idea of bureaucracy substantively here. Okay. According to Mill, the term bureaucracy implied direct work of government, and he refers to bureaucrats as actual governors. He says that the recruitment of such governors should be based on merit, that is, intelligence, education, skills. He says that this bureaucracy is the permanent strength of the public service. So it should function in a highly professional manner. So he recommends that there should be a selection test, rules for promotion. There should be rules for transaction of business amongst various bureaucrats, record keeping, measures of responsibility and accountability.
So it was before Weber or after?
Before Weber. Pre-bureaucratic बात कर रहे हैं ना? Pre-Weber. At least 50 years before Weber. Okay, if you want, I can tell you the. Okay, he wrote in 1861 called The Considerations of Representative Government, a work, an essay, in 1861. Okay, before, and Weber actually places the work much after that. Now, please understand Mill's view on various things. While looking at the relationship between the representative government and bureaucracy, he does not isolate bureaucracy. He says that bureaucracy is as much as a part of the policy process. Rather, he viewed bureaucracy as an institution having the repository of experience, skills, knowledge. And they say that the Mills say that the political executive actually lacks all these things. And therefore, there should not be much political interference. Mills also questioned the dangers of bureaucracy regarding abuse of power, how it limits the human creativity. And he says that the corrupt bureaucrats should be removed utilizing the political power or the representative democracy. So you see, this view in a way is also a pre-positivist view. Millsonian view is a pre-positivist view, because the positivist view of bureaucracy The, the positivist view is looking at bureaucracy as a value-free entity. Here, Mills is not looking at it as a value-free entity. Because Mills qualifies that this bureaucracy is a neutral entity in the partisan politics. So he ascribes a value of neutrality on the bureaucracy. So it is not considering a value-free view of the bureaucracy. Also at the same time, being neutral by the views of Mills, it is not an inert, non-reactionary force. But as an entity with stability, skill, knowledge, ability, and experience to mediate the process in the democratic decision making. Therefore, bureaucracy becomes an agent in a democratic system of progress and development. So wherever you have to highlight the developmental view of bureaucracy or even in developmental administration, you can use J.S. Mills. Can you see the hues of Millsonian view in today's governance and good governance, where it is acting as an agent of interface of multiple stakeholders, arriving at consensus on decision making, part of the political process, yet neutral, part of the decision making public policy, right? So this views still echoes. Okay. Next, let us look at Hegel. G.W. Friedrich Hegel. He was actually publishing in 1821, working on the idea that how this liberal states can be organized. And in that, he puts the civil service as a very essential element of government. Now, he is viewing it from a class lens. He labels this bureaucracy or civil services as a universal class. As a universal class. Since they work to realize the universal interest. Hegel considers bureaucracy as a transcendent entity, almost equates it with the state's will. And Hegel actually gave inspiration or played a role in inspiring Wilson, wherein Wilson believes that such civil service should be a class of educated, morally upright public servants, those who will serve the common will. Apart from that, while looking at the bureaucracy as a functional instrument, Hegel stresses on functional division. Functional division of authority, hierarchy, functional division of authority, hierarchy, separating the office and the individual. So there can be a Prime Minister Narendra Modi or Manmohan Singh or Jawaharlal Nehru, but the office of the Prime Minister is more important than the individual. So in that sense, the separation. Okay, merit-based recruitment through competition, fixed remuneration, fixed remuneration, and working in the common good. You see, Hegel is writing in 1800s, and Hegel feels that if the society is egalitarian, then the bureaucracy based on the given structure that he gives will be the most appropriate structure. Okay? So you see, here in Hegel is coming close to the Weberian idea of bureaucracy. Remuneration, professionalism, of importance to the position, not to the person. Okay. So that is where we need to understand. Then obviously Marx is somebody that we have studied, so I'm not getting into the Marxian idea. Neither I am getting into the Weberian edifice. You all know that. But we'll be surely looking at the critique of the Weber's ideal type bureaucracy. While Weber himself admitted that his ideal type bureaucracy cannot be found anywhere in reality, right, and has no connection at all with making such value judgments. But Weber's model was criticized from the point of view of its applicability. First, it was huge. Second, it was inert. Third, it was structurally insufficient. It would simply lead to creation of big structures with ambiguous rules and expenditure. And the whole social system of organization will be dominated by secretive functioning, alienation from the scrutiny and society. And this bureaucracy would transform into nothing but technocracy. So for example, Bennis. Heard of him? Warren Bennis. एक क्वेश्चन भी आया हुआ है, there's a PYQ as well. बताया कौन सा है, कब आया है? चलो एक मिनट बताते हैं. वो PYQ लिख कर देना है, ओके? Difference between leader and manager. But we will not ask this question. नहीं, क्वेश्चन एक तो ये आया था, एक और भी आया था 2020 में, 2020, ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ऑफ द फ्यूचर will be organic adaptive structures but temporary systems. Discuss how Warren Bennis characterizes the new form of organization. ये ज्यादा वेबेरियन हुआ ना, वो लीडर मैनेजर वाला ज्यादा वेबेरियन नहीं है क्वेश्चन. Should I repeat? Organizations of the future will be organic adaptive structures. Organic hyphen adaptive structures. Organizations of the future will be organic adaptive structures, but temporary systems. Full stop. Discuss how Warren Bennis characterizes the new form of organization. The new form of organization. देखते हैं फिर क्या लिखते हैं हम इसमें. And please, if you are referring to those solved PYQs which are available in the market, this Prakashan, that book, Maafi. Okay? Bring them to me, I can point out 100 flaws and logically explain them. Okay? Don't use ChatGPT either. Right? Write it yourself. See, you may end up writing the most pathetic answer. No worries, but at least you'll think on these lines. ठीक है? So Bennis says that the traditional bureaucratic model is outdated in the contemporary dynamic globalized society. People like Tulloch, Downs, Niskanen, कहां के लोग हैं ये? PCA, NPM, we are relating them with this. So that also approach criticizes the bureaucracy. Right? That approach says that bureaucracies actually create huge machines that are out of control. And therefore, they all are emphasizing on debureaucratization. Okay? Then, again, another critic, Merton. इस पे भी एक क्वेश्चन आया हुआ है ना, मर्टन पे, रॉबर्ट के मर्टन. गोल डिस्प्लेसमेंट थ्योरी. अरे ब्यूरोक्रेसी की गोल डिस्प्लेसमेंट थ्योरी, that the bureaucracy gets so obsessed with rules, regulations, processes that it leads to suboptimum realization or the displacement of the goal itself. ओके, अंडरस्टूड? ये बात समझ में आ गई सबके? ओके, अभी होमवर्क एक ही दिया है ना मैंने, एक ही क्वेश्चन दिया है ना होमवर्क. नाउ लेट अस कम टू द पोस्ट ब्यूरोक्रेटिक नैरेटिव्स. or the post-Weberian bureaucratic narratives. The first is public choice approach. कौन कौन है स्कॉलर? Buchanan, Niskanen, Tulloch. By those who are critiquing bureaucracy will only be the people post-bureaucratic. We are not talking about the neo-Weberian. We are talking about the post-Weberian or the post-bureaucratic. Okay. Tulloch, Buchanan, Niskanen. हाँ वो भी. Whereas there are certain post-bureaucrats who are actually post-Weberian, who are actually reinforcing the idea. And this is by Elliot Jacques. It's Jaqueus. Elliot Jacques. So he actually is assuming, write down this idea. He is actually assuming the bureaucratic organization as an indispensable entity. And he is looking at the bureaucracy within the larger ecosystem of social institutions and human nature. Okay? Even Waldo actually supports the Elliot Jacques and says that the way Jacques is actually putting the bureaucracy, it can be a good strategy for the organizations to actually deal with dysfunctions. Basically, Jacques tries to humanize bureaucracy to serve the society. In a way, more moving towards the constitutional bureaucracy. And he says that instead of an isolatory approach, it should be an interactive participation. But based on what? There should be a criteria for participation based on constitutional grounds. So you are looking at whatever unit of community, whether you are looking at a factory, a village, a school, government department, hospital, all these are units, social units. They should engage in dialogue with each other to overcome the differences. And he says bureaucracy should be an agent for this engagement, to more constitutionalize, humanize the bureaucracy. Okay, so these are some of the post-Weberian, point of view. Along with this, the post-Weberian, the new public service, neo-Weberian state, participatory governance. I hope you are making note of it. लिख रहे हो नहीं लिख रहे? Participatory governance, digital era governance, and other hybrid governance models. All of them constitute the post-Weberian idea. Now, another homework that you all will do is structuring this post-Weberian idea, writing short notes on it, on each of them. जितनी मैंने चीजें बताई हैं. Understood? Friends watching us online, understood? So please remember, apart from public choice, the humanistic view, critical theory, governance, all of these will form the post-Weberian idea. Also, the phenomenological analysis, situation and contingency theory, postmodern administration, all of it is post-Weberian. Okay. Now, this actually deals with whatever the details up to session 6 have been given to you. ठीक है, आज कौन सा सेशन है? 6th. Right. Now we'll start with administrative thought. कितने होमवर्क हो गए? 2 हो गए ना? 1 PYQ एंड अदर दिस राइट अप, है ना? एक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव थॉट से भी दिया जाएगा. नाउ बिफोर आई सब्सटैंटिवली, तीसरा कौन सा हुआ? अच्छा हाँ, एक टेलोरियन एडिफिस वाला भी था. राइट राइट राइट, याद है मेरे को ना. होमवर्क देने की आदत बड़ी है, भूल जाता हूं कितने दिए. ठीक है. So if you look at administrative thought, again a major chunk. Okay, roughly 50 marks every year. I mean, that is almost, we cannot be that empirical and positivist in our analysis because it can be distributed across options, but that is almost 20% of the entire thing in paper 1. And there have been questions across scientific management, participative management, human relations school, dynamic administration, functions of the executive, Weber that we have dealt. Okay, classical theory, right? Then there are certain abstract questions. Homework number 4. And this is not a homework to be done today. This will continue for 2-3 days. So you can take it up to this week. There are certain abstract questions. One of that question is, and this was asked in 2021, integration of different streams of administrative thought. Integration of different streams of administrative thought. to propound a universal administrative theory is hindered by the impact of culture. By the impact of culture. Can you recall, critically examine, full stop, critically examine. Can you recall, we talked about how some things are acting as an obstruction to theory building? किसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात करी थी? इकोलॉजिकल अप्रोच तो यहां भी लगेगी दादा. याद करो. किसी को याद है? फ्रेंड्स हु आर वाचिंग ऑनलाइन, डज एनीबॉडी रिमेंबर? Isn't this question on the similar lines? But we are looking at it from the point of view of administrative thought. चलो याद करके बताना, ज्यादा टाइम नहीं बर्बाद करते इस पे. Okay. Another question which is again related to administrative thought, and you can slot it in organizations as well. It depends. Organization theory is not a single theory with a loosely knit of many approaches to organizational analysis, and it provides different answers to different situations. Comment. This was asked last year, 2023. Okay. So such kind of abstract questions can be asked. Right? I hope you all understand that I am not going to teach you every thinker that okay, this is Taylor, this is systematic soldiering, this is Simon, this is bounded rationality. No. We are going to take a broad view of things. Okay. So you see, and today we'll largely be setting the stage. Industrial revolution in the West actually created the need for a managerial revolution. Why? Functions were getting complex, scale was getting bigger, and the organizations wanted to maximize their profits. And this gave rise to inquiry. It was a period of post-enlightenment rationality, and hence the positivist view was the widely recognized view as a system of inquiry. Okay. And many theories emerged to make these organizations effective and efficient. Now these theories get applied in public administration because we are dealing with administration as an organization. Okay, but please remember, while dealing with the unit administrative thought, we need not write biographies of the scholars. हमें उनकी जीवनी नहीं लिखनी है. 500 वर्ड के आंसर वाला एरा इज गॉन. You are no more asked to write answers in 500 words. At max, you have a liberty of up to 300, 315, 325. That's it. वो वहां पैदा हुआ, वो लड़का था, उसे वहां प्यार हुआ, फिर शादी हुई, फिर बच्चे हुए, वो सब नहीं चाहिए अपने. I don't need that in your answers. Neither the UPSC need it. Okay, so focus on the themes. Just to give an example, for when I say that Taylor had a worm's eye view of the organization, what do you understand by this? But Taylor was working at the shop floor level, so he had a worm's eye view. ये building है. This is a worm. Worm is looking at the building. एसएससी की भी तैयारी कर लो, ईडीएम्स वगैरह आते हैं. So this is a worm's eye view. Whereas this is a bird. So this is a bird's eye view. Right? Something which is outside the organization. Somebody who's working at the top management. Somebody is working at the middle management. Taylor was working here. So you should understand from which vantage point that person was looking, not where he was born. You should try and get into the mind of the scholar. You look at people who are at the lowermost hierarchy in an organization. They only look for incentives whenever there will be a bonus. Right? People who are at the managerial level will look at profits, more business. है ना? Basic understanding. This is the basic understanding. Okay. So please be very diligent that I don't need the sort of biographies that many of you have a habit of actually writing. Okay, so like I said, the questions actually span to multiple areas. Prominent of them being, I'll make you write the themes first. Okay, so these are the themes that you should focus. SMT, scientific management, participative management, human relations school, Foley, she was one of the favorites of the last decades of public administration paper setters. Before that, it was Taylor, Gulick and Erwick. Okay, if you analyze the 20 odd years trend, you will find that. Barnard, that is our very own Chester Barnard. Weber, Simon. The idea is fairly simple here. That you get your tracks covered with regards to this. Unless you are coming with a very poor luck, you will be benefited. I am simply being positivist in my approach. There is no other thing apart from this logic and data analysis that I have done. Okay, so I am giving you with that honesty, hoping that the UPSC will continue. We are not in the business of predicting the examination. Okay. Then the abstract theme. Even if you will look at the abstract theme, that revolves around organization and multiple thinkers are there. So there will be a statement about organization. Let me give you a sample. Dwight Waldo in his book, The Administrative State, emphatically mentions that the root of administrative theory lies in political theory. Critically examine Waldo's contention. So this is clearly, we cannot say that this is administrative thought the way syllabus has given us, because syllabus does not mention Waldo, but it is again an administrative thought. Some of you will say, no sir, it is Waldo, we will place it in paper 1. But is Waldo, and the way we read Waldo in NPA paper 1, New Public Administration, are we reading Waldo like this? No. So here, the idea is that we actually draw the thread. Okay, where he says that the roots of administrative theory lies in political theory. So, paper 1, political view of public administration. Now understand, should I erase this? अब यहां the fine line comes. The fine line is that whenever you see the political view of public administration, we are in unit 1. Okay, this is very interesting. इस चीज को समझना मजा आएगा. Now, in case of Waldo, we are looking at NPA. है ना? ये एक सेपरेट डिसिप्लिन है, मतलब एक सेपरेट आइडिया है. नाउ वी विल हैव टू लिंक इट. एनपीए क्या बात कर रहा था? इवन इफ आई डू नॉट नो अबाउट द पब्लिकेशन दैट इज बीइंग मेंशन्ड इन द क्वेश्चन, क्लियरली आई डू नॉट नो. ओके, वॉल्डो, पेपर 1, political school, so there would be a political view of public administration, that I know. Now, because of the statement, I know that Waldo subscribes to that view. अच्छा, Waldo के बारे में I know only NPA, nothing beyond. Let us assume it this way. How less is more? How with minimal knowledge you can still construct the answer? NPA is talking about what? Taking closer to the society from the confines of the bureaucracy. Isn't it about politics? Isn't it about resource distribution, selection, decision making? बन गया आंसर. And it says critically examine the Waldo's contention. So with policy view, you have to critique. What will be the critique? Institutional. So with institutional view, you will do the critique, but the ground setting will be done by here and here, and you do not know about Waldo's publication at all. But still, you can attempt the answer. So that is the level of, diligence. If you will pay, you will get it. Some isolated question on CMT, that is classical management theory or the classical theory. Okay, administrative man bridges the psychological man and rational man. Who was talking about these mans? कौन सा थिंकर बात कर रहा था? एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव मैन, दिस मैन, दैट मैन. करेक्ट. हाँ जी. Which thinker was talking about it? Simon?
Social man.
Social man, economic man, this man, that man. Simon? Administrative man की बात हो रही है, but we will compare it with something, na? So the question says, administrative man bridges the psychological man and rational man. In classical theory, when you read Taylor, Fayol, etc., you talk about these men. So that is the idea. So a blended idea which is coming. Simon's theory is something that I have talked about. Foley again is somebody that we have talked about. So you see, these are the thrust areas from the unit of administrative thought. So the chances are that if you keep these thrust areas strong, you will score well from this section. Also, it makes choices easy in the examination. So, rest what I'll do is I'll do a background setting and then we'll end, because substantively we'll start thinkers from the next session. Okay. So you see, like I said, with the industrial revolution, the demand from the industries, etc., and many theories emerged. So there was this SMT, scientific management theory, which got further extended by scholars like Taylor. Classical theory, Fayol, Gulick and Arvik. Okay. Apart from that, there are more thinkers, Mooney, Riley, etc. Bureaucratic theory, Weber. Now, these theories, if you see, were largely labeled as mechanistic. Why? Because they ignore the human element or human aspects in the organization. है ना? Then comes the savior. कौन आता है? Fole to is dynamic administration. Fole was ahead of her times. अरे भाई, मैंने बोला भी है ह्यूमन एलिमेंट, सेवियर ऑफ ह्यूमन एलिमेंट्स. तो इसके बाद कौन सा स्कूल आएगा? ह्यूमन रिलेशंस थ्योरी, मेयो, एल्टन मेयो. See, you must be thinking why I am telling you this ABC. The idea is it's like a song. If you remember it, you will remember the order, and the order will help you remember the concepts. Okay, so then comes human relations school that actually stresses on the humane aspects in the administration and management. In addition to the prevailing mechanistic way. So human relations theory is not a replacement of the classical school, but rather an enrichment. Okay. Then comes the behavioral school. In behavioral school, we can talk about scholars like Maslow, Bernard, Herzberg, Simon, McGregor, and somewhere between. So if I say the first, second, third, somewhere here is Fole. Dynamic administration. Okay, and they are looking at far more behavioral aspects and more concepts like motivation, leadership, decision making, group dynamics, communication. So while the earlier theories had a structural functional approach where they dealt with the structural elements of the organization, the behavioral school was actually associated with the people's element, the humans element within the organization, and how do they interact. Right? Social systems. But this interaction part has not been emphasized by the behavioralist a lot. Therefore, the critics of the behavioral school use systems approach to emphasize upon this interaction, how system, subsystems, etc. actually interact, perform, what impacts the other, and the environment. So here with the critique of behavioral, we begin to look at the ecological and the systems elements in the organization. And then comes the contingency theorists who are actually throwing light on the determinants of the organizational structures and behavior. On the determinants of the organizational structures and behavior. Okay, understood? So, while this is the academic transition that is happening with regards to the administrative thought, but we should not ignore Kautilya Arthashastra, because that is also a part of the administrative thought. If we can study Fayol, if we can study Weber, German, we can study Taylor, American. Why not study Indian as well?
So this is very vividly defined in Arthashastra.
Arthashastra, it's very vividly defined, right? And I guess I told you that Kautilya is called as the Machiavelli of the East, but rather Machiavelli should be called as the Kautilya of the West, because Kautilya in a way predated,
but and it's more superior because Kautilya created an empire, and that was just a small city or state.
right. In terms of the sophistication and the diversity, the Kautilya deserves far more credit. But alas, what we can do? We were colonized for bloody 200 years. So
View of the plains and here it's looks
right, everything for that matter. Arthashastra is something which is important. So I'll start with Arthashastra. Right. Let us have a brief background of it. Mandala theory and other theories we'll be dealing when we'll come to paper 2. Right. But it is a good note to cover Kautilya. Okay. So one of the foremost thinkers was Kautilya himself. So interestingly, just as an anecdotal evidence, logic, he actually overthrew the Nanda dynasty, and Chandragupta Maurya was placed on the throne. So his work, Arthashastra, actually presents a detailed account. It's called the Treatise on Statecraft. It is also not only dealing with administration alone, it is dealing with administration in a very contextual, environmental, ecological way, because it is dealing with economic conditions, institutions, social conditions, and every possible sort of correlation that is being built into it. Okay? Though there are multiple debates regarding the timeline, what he did, but broadly we can say there were 15 books or 15 adhikarnas of Arthashastra. It involves diversity of topics, that is, largely the central node is the instructions to the king, but these 15 volumes deal with various aspects. For example, regarding selection of ministers, how the spies, internal, external activity will be dealt with, the political and the economic agencies, family regulations, criminal justice, public service, economic issues. What do you understand by sovereignty, international relations, national distress, war, invasion, etc.?
Role of leader and king.
Wo duties for the king, instructions to the king, that part has been covered. So just to give a pointer, isn't it something, because we talk about disaster management, ethics and everything, isn't it something that covers the entire syllabus of public administration? Also, isn't it something that is all encompassing of the responsibilities or the remit of operations of public administration? Okay. So it was a very comprehensive document. But one thing we will have to be very sure, that it was a monarchical system. Now your task will be actually 2 or 3 things across the administrative thought. The vision with which you should study now, one, because you know the basics. First would be the comparative analysis. Comparative analysis in the sense that how is, let us say, human relations theory different and same to the classical theory or the behavioral theory or like that. Look for contemporary linkage slash application. Where can I see Taylorism today? Where can I see Fayol's theory? Where can I see or apply theory X and theory Y of McGregor? Right? Also, juxtaposition with present themes. For example, can I find good governance in Arthashastra? Were there elements of good governance in behavioral theory or NPM or NPA? Societal elements, ecological elements, institutional elements, narrow elements, broad elements. These should be my guiding light for analysis. Okay. So, using these things, we will see various theories. So, Arthashastra places king at the very top. Okay? Who's the supreme executive? And before him, rather below him, lies the ministers. Okay? There is a prime minister, high priest, and other officials. So there is an inner cabinet and then there is a larger cabinet, which must be consulted during the times of emergency. Which principles do we see getting reflected in Arthashastra? Accountability, authority. So remember, important order. Accountability is there in Arthashastra. But what is the source? Authority. Okay, so from the most important principles to the lesser important ones, lesser prominent ones rather. Okay, authority, responsibility, discipline. And then so on. So principle of authority is central to the state. Okay? Unity of command, direction, flow from authority. Okay? four different methods of motivation: Sam, Dam, Dand, Ved. Dand means punishment, Dam means incentives, Sam means persuasion, Bhed means competition. While talking about principles of responsibility and accountability, it is not just for the king, but also for the state officials. When we talk about division of labor, coordination, specialization, hierarchy, they are also present. Then financial administration. If you look at Kautilyan financial administration, the central idea was to strengthen the sovereignty of the state, because based on finance depended the rule. Hence the name Arthashastra. Public prosperity was the goal, right? And there were rewards for good conduct. Criminal justice system to capture the thieves. Okay? Good harvest. All those things were there. Now, there will be questions. Questions like, Arthashastra had a well-defined disaster management policy. Something that I say, the present reality. So there were, whenever, let us say, this is the territory and this is my neighbor, I have to invade. So the army would march. It, in the process, might destroy farms. ऐसा था नहीं ना कि NH1 से चले जाओ. Right? It was not like that. So the people were compensated. Also, regarding floods, etc., tax ops, drought, flood, tax ops, etc., were given. Okay? Understood? Also, it had attached importance to the elements of budgeting, classification of revenues and expenditure, sources of income. About more than 65 sources of incomes have been mentioned. You had various officials, a collector general who was a ministerial level official, right? Security as a measure was the part of the home department.
Taxation was the one.
Taxation was there.
So very vivid taxation.
Yes, a very sophisticated taxation machinery.
GST was.
Right, you can draw parallels with GST. That is what the application elements I was looking at. Okay. Similarly, a very sophisticated judicial administration. There were in charges of, let us say, public works, a very sophisticated personnel administration. Okay. Why I am taking up Kautilya is not because Kautilya was somebody from our land. The idea is to set the context. Okay, because when we'll be dealing with Taylor, etc., we have to actually think with those eyes. Right. So, with regard to personnel administration, we can say a clear-cut system of recruitment, merit, salaries, promotions, etc. That was also there. Okay, but we will have to see that there was criticism also. Criticism in the sense that Arthashastra, though a grand treatise, not only lays out the broader ideas but also the detailed rules, regulations dealing with wide variety of subjects. Okay. But it is said that this grand edifice, the critics say that this grand edifice was created to actually strengthen, reinforce, legitimize an anarchical rule, a despotic rule, to run a sinister administration for kings' political success and dominance. Okay, so this is one of the critique. There are more critiques in paper 1 that we study. Okay, so this was just to illustrate how with what eye we need to see the unit of administrative thought. When it comes to the organizational theories and the thought, there are two broad streams that are emerging. Okay, the first is the universal design. That is the one best way. है ना? That we largely associate with the theory building, especially in the classical era and somewhat beyond it. Okay? So this is also called as a closed system approach. Why I am giving you these terminologies? Because the question might not exactly refer classical theories. It says that the closed system approach or the closed systems agenda of universalization of theory building was flawed. And आप सोच रहे हो साहब ये closed system कौन सा है? Okay. So this is one of the major school wherein we can slot, let us say, SMT, CMT, bureaucratic theory. The other is the situational design. The situational design, which is far more flexible, fluid, adjustment in relation to the other factors. For example, technological changes. Example is Human Relations School. It is also called as an open system. Open system approach. While the closed system approach is actually focusing on the physical environment of the organization, the formal part of the organization, and sees organization as a rational, impersonal system. It stresses on the physiological and mechanical aspects of organization. With respect to humans, it takes an atomistic view. It takes an atomistic view. The manner of supervision is authoritative. Whereas the open system, so the classical example of this would be Fayol, while this would be Mayo. Okay. Wherein the social environment is stressed upon, informal organization is stressed upon, organization is being looked at as a emotional social system, emphasis on sociological and psychological aspects. But you see, even if you see Mayo and Fayol, None of them are saying that the efficiency and productivity is to be compromised. They remain the goal. They continue to remain the goal of the organization. All right. So this is the background setting that we had to do. From tomorrow, we'll start our course with thinkers, starting from scientific management, FW Taylor. Right? What you can do at this instant, and this is for your own intellectual appetite. Take whatever reading material you have, give it 1 hour, not more than that, 1 hour, and take as many quotes of scholars. Take as many quotes of scholars. Right? In the Telegram group, I have pinned a Twitter thread. Okay? That thread also has about 40-50 quotes. Okay? So what you can do is just, whatever reading material you have, take the quotes of these scholars. Why? Because more often than not, we see 10 markers which are compulsory in question number 1 and 5 coming from those quotes. Also, the interpretation of those quotes will help you write other answers better, even if it's not a compulsory answer, any answer. So just make a collection of those quotes and see whether you know the theory well or not. The ones that you do not know, flag it in our discussions. That okay, this is a quote by a particular scholar, I am not getting it, in what context it is being talked about. Okay, don't use chat GPT. Why? Because chat GPT itself can hallucinate. Okay, when it will not find the quotes, it will make a quote by itself and ascribe, okay, this was said by Abhishiekh Saxena. Okay, so chat GPT can hallucinate. Read, take the standard material, whatever you have. Okay, spend 1 hour, not more than 1 hour. And all the thinkers that are there for the next 2-3 days that we are going to take up. CMT, SMT, Human Relations School, Behavioral School, Waldo, Mayo, this and that, all the thinkers, just have a summary of 150-200 quotes. That's it. Nothing else. Okay. So with this, I would like to end today's session. But before I go, just flip through the pages and let me know. Okay, so Ananya want to ask that how can we handle questions like the one I was saying that disaster management in Arthashastra. You have to make those linkages. Linkages in the sense that what am I talking? I am talking about some sort of a relief, compensation, management. So when I read Kautilya, I will have to see what he does in times of, let us say, drought, natural calamities. Because modern theme is a disaster management. Modern theme might be how it is working towards creating social cohesion or social capital. These are the themes. For example, if I like somebody pointed out with related to taxation, something like GST. Okay, we'll have to see what is prevailing today and what was there in the past. Also, there can be a question of India's neighborhood policy. And Arthashastra, Mandala theory. So, right. So, while you are reading these thinkers, think. Where is it relevant in present context? Understood, Anand?
It's like what we are having that
Use the what?
necklace of diamond theory is
Right, string of pearls.
it is countering the string of pearls.
It is necklace of diamond is countering the string of pearls. I know. I mean, the necklace of diamond comes into the picture because of string of pearls. Okay, so this is how you will have to handle these questions. Any more doubts before we end the session? ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से देखना पड़ेगा. Pillars of good governance. So whenever you read Taylorism, let us see you read systematic soldiering. Taylor is called as anti-unionist, for example. So whenever you see systematic soldiering, where can you see the systematic soldiering in present day administration? Bureaucratic lobbying, which they internally lobby. One bureaucrat lobbying for another bureaucrat. It is what? It is akin to systematic soldiering. Okay. So read the concept and see where I can, and this will help you actually give examples in the examination as well. Okay. All right. So with this, let's end today's session. Thank you so much.